My brother tells me it's not very safe to travel alone. The rules of the road say the same. Written by C.B. Jones. The following is a transcript from a short radio program that has been picked up by various listeners across the continental United States. Many have been perplexed by its sudden appearance and how it seems to preempt whatever song or radio program they are listening to at the time. Others have heard it pop up as soon as they drive out of range of certain radio tower broadcasts, appearing suddenly when their program starts to cut out. The broadcast had been growing stronger and with more range and means of attack. No longer would a listener be required to only be listening to the radio in order to pick it up. Some listeners began to report that they had been listening to podcast streams or Spotify or Apple Music when the mysterious radio program suddenly appeared. I received a call from Leslie, a young woman in her early 20s who had experienced Buck Hensley's down-home delivery and dire warning sometime last June. This is her story. It's not very safe for a girl out there on the road.
This is something that I hear all of the time. No matter the journey, no matter the situation, and no matter my history of traveling alone as a female, so far without incident, I rolled my eyes.
It's just something I've never really had to think about. Like, as a guy, Need to go down to the store by myself late at night? I can do it without thinking. Drink at a bar alone? Check. I can do it without being creeped on. I guess I could get robbed, but they might be less apt to jump a 180-pound guy versus whatever you're checking in at.
Bitch, do you want to go? I will get you on the ground and have you tapping out in 5 seconds. Although it had been a few months, I had taken some Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes and had grappled my brother into submission many times. He said he was going to a class so he could beat me, but he never did.
No thanks. I know how that will end. Seriously, Leslie, just be careful out there. As your older brother, I'm obligated to tell you these things. If you could just wait a couple weeks until I get my time off, I could go with you.
Can't wait. The mountains are calling me, and I must go. I've got a schedule to work around too,
You got your taser, the pepper spray, knife?
Yeah.
Fine. Well, I'll see you down there in a few weeks. And update me on your itinerary as you go. I don't need Mom freaking out while you're off the grid.
Will do, Brosophus. My older brother Jamie and I were close. About as close as a pair of siblings could get. There were times that I could almost consider him my best friend. In fact, based on our long shared history and his loyalty and consistency throughout our lives, he was probably best friend runner-up. I had planned this trip for a while now. Graduating from University of Michigan this past spring, I was taking a long summer trip before I had to start grad school in the fall. I was going on an epic cross-country trip, solo for big portions of it. I would start at Zion and Arches down in Utah, then wind over to Yosemite and up towards the Pacific Northwest. I was meeting a guy from school down for some rock climbing, and then meeting with other various friends along the way. My brother was planning on meeting me in Yosemite. I was looking forward to the adventure. And so, with my bags packed and plenty of snacks and water, a Spotify playlist I had labored over the past week, I set off on the road. I didn't start as early as I had wanted. The bed just seemed too cozy and comfortable. But by 10 o'clock, I was heading west. I was just outside of Omaha by 11 and found a La Quinta Inn. After a mediocre continental breakfast, I was back on the road. I was planning on taking a more scenic route in my approach to Zion and cut through the northern part of Colorado and made my way down. After a flight of beers at a brewery pit stop in Fort Collins, I was on the road once again and the night was all around me. My road trip playlist was getting old and my mind was numb and loopy. I was just about to turn it off and drive in sweet silence when the song I was playing suddenly began to speed up and sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks. I laughed at how it sounded. The speed devolved into a high-pitched whine, and then there was a thumping, and all of a sudden, a voice emerged from my speakers.
Hi, folks. Buck Hensley here with another episode of Rules of the Road. I interrupt your playlist tonight in conjunction with Spotify Radio. We've worked out a little sponsorship deal. I would like to tell you about a little product I have available known as Buck's Sassy Sarsaparilla. Feeling a little down? A sip of Buck's Sassy Sarsaparilla will perk you right up. Feeling a little too on the edge? A sip of Buck's will calm you right down. Feeling a little too constrained by the linear progression of time and causal events? A sip of Buck's will get you all shook up and allow you to experience everything all at once, forever. It's available in all stores near you, provided you know how to ask and know the secret password. Just wink at the clerk, give him a thumbs up and say, "I'm looking for that sassy sweetness." They'll know what to do.
What was this? I thought I paid for premium with no ads. I listened on, as I did find it humorous, and I needed something besides music anyways.
You know, it's not very safe for a girl out there alone on the road.
A shiver down my spine. Those familiar words.
It's not very safe for a boy out there on the road either, or a non-binary person for that matter. And it sure as hell ain't safe for a genderless individual who has transcended their corporeal body. The road is just a plain, dangerous place. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little protection out there? Someone looking out for you? Well, follow tonight's rule of the road if you desire a little more security and reassurance. It's extremely simple. If at any point during your journey you come across a panhandler with a cardboard sign and a dog at his side, toss him a couple bucks. He's been on the road a long time, and his dog is hungry, and he is oh so tired. Look closely. The panhandler is tall and imposing, and something is not right about the dog. Why, the dog has its own little coat and hood pulled over its head. Isn't that funny? You seem skeptical, and I get it. I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, "Buck, it's 20. Nobody carries cash anymore. I'm lucky if I have 50 cents in my ashtray. Why, just the other day I blew through a toll station and the alarms went off and I thought I was a goner and I pulled off at a long-term parking lot and changed my license plate so they wouldn't find me. I use Venmo and Google Pay and all these other fancy bells and whistle applications on my smartphone. And to that I say, fair enough. But you better have some cash on you when you take a long journey. Why, it's just plain common sense. What if you run into a toll road? What if you find the world's best taco truck and they only accept cash? What if you pull over at a rest stop and they have a soda machine that's serving Buck's Sassy Sarsaparilla? All those things would be a huge inconvenience, and things you could avoid if you had some scratch on hand. But if you don't have the cash, or just straight up ignore the warning, then this is what will happen. Absolutely nothing. Yes, that's right, nothing will happen. You can just go on your merry little way and have a good old time out there on your journey. But you must remember, the road is not a safe place. Wouldn't you like to have a little protection? I know I would. Well, that's all for tonight. I bid you adieu. May the road rise up to meet you, and not ask you if you have met your Savior. May it rise up to meet you, and not ask if you would like to learn about a brand new, exciting business opportunity. May it simply rise up to meet you and say, sup. Stay alert, stay lively, stay lonely. Once again, I'm Buck Hensley, and these are the rules of the road.
The monologue shut off instantly and returned to my playlist. I turned it off and drove silently. I was a little perturbed by the radio program or advertisement, or whatever it was, and was thinking about emailing Spotify a complaint. I was a premium subscriber and wasn't supposed to receive ads. But besides the annoyance, I didn't like how it had echoed what my brother had said prior to my departure. His very own words. I figured it had to be coincidence. It was a common sentiment, after all. I began to get creeped out and paranoid, especially driving on the dark roads through the mountains as the night got later and later. Why had I planned it this way? Why was I in such a rush? I was missing all of the pretty mountains by driving through them at night. I should have stayed the night in Fort Collins. But I barreled on ahead. I was going to need gas soon, and I figured that I could make it to Steamboat Springs. I was 25 miles to empty when I began to see the signs for town and pulled off towards the first gas station that I saw. It was off the highway behind some trees, and the lights were bright, and the station looked empty. As I was pulling into the station, I could see a tall figure walking down the sidewalk. He had a dog with him. They were both wearing coats, and the figure had a ball cap slung down low over his face. In his other hand, he clutched a piece of cardboard to his side. I pulled up next to the pump and looked back at the man and his dog. They walked across the parking lot and sat down on a large decorative boulder in a flower bed with a yucca. The dog had a literal hoodie on, and it was pulled over his head. Aside from the 4 legs and the wagging tail, you wouldn't be able to tell what it was. It was a medium-sized dog, and the hood seemed to cover a rather large head. I thought of approaching them. I had cash on me, and I knew it was important. That was something Buck Hensley didn't have to tell me. Was I really going to give money to every panhandler I saw with a dog from here on out for the next 2 months? I began to pump my gas, keeping a wary eye on the man and his dog. They were about 100 feet away, and I could see the man reach into his backpack and pull something out and feed the dog.
Excuse me, miss.
I turned around. I hadn't even heard him come up behind me. He was a wiry man with wild eyes and a tattooed tear on his face. His arms were ropes of muscle and dark with sleeves of faded tattoos. Instinctively, I reached for the knife in my pocket, but before I can even do so, there was a blinding flash in my eyes and pain across the bridge of my nose that almost brought me to my knees. I could feel the pain and heavy feeling across my face. I cried out, but that was met with a rough and callous hand across my mouth. It tasted dirty, and I gagged. I felt cold still on my throat and heard him whisper in my ear as I struggled against him.
Shh, 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 shh. Don't scream or I'll slit your fucking throat, bitch. You got that?
I nodded. My nose ached and his hand pressed against it and made it worse. Warm blood and tears ran down my face and over my lips and into his hand. He gripped my face tightly, reached into my pocket, and got my knife. I like to think that in the face of such a thing, that I would go down fighting, that I would put up more of a fight than I did, that I would find a way to escape. Maybe all the victims out there that this happened to thought the same. But I didn't do anything like that. I went into a sort of autopilot, and in that initial moment, if he had told me to walk off a cliff or into traffic, I probably would have complied. As it is, he told me to get into the trunk of an old-looking sedan, and I did so. I lied in the trunk, claustrophobic panic rising within me, and trying to stay calm. It all had happened so fast. Surely someone had seen this happen. Someone had to have called the cops. The guy with his dog? Did he see? My nose was still bleeding, and I pulled the front of my shirt up and put gentle pressure on it. I thought of screaming and kicking the trunk door, but I was afraid to anger my captor. And what would he do to silence me if I did such a thing? I focused on my breathing and took stock of my surroundings, feeling with my hands until my eyes adjusted to the dark. I felt several objects of smooth plastic with liquid in them, containers of motor oil or antifreeze. Then there were several metal cylinders, cans of some type of spray. One of the cans had a big plastic nozzle in the shape of a trumpet. I couldn't feel anything else and was hoping for a tire iron or something else I could use as a makeshift weapon. I could see the warm glow of street lamps shine in through a rusted-out hole in the lid of the trunk. I could hear the car's tires on the road, and that was all. The car slowed, and the texture of the road changed into something crunchy. There was no more illumination. We had left the highway and were now going down some back road. The roads were windy, and the car leaned into steep curves while I steadied myself against the trunk walls to keep from rolling around. I was starting to fear the worst. We were going out in the wilderness, far from everyone, and he was going to have his way with me. I wasn't going to let him, and I vowed I would go down fighting. Finally, the car stopped. The engine turned off. Silence. I could hear footsteps crunching on gravel outside, see his shadow cross the rusted-out holes. I rolled onto my stomach, face down, a can of spray in my hands. The trunk creaked open. The hinges bounced.
Get out,
He commanded. I didn't answer.
Get out.
He hissed. I lay still, playing possum.
Get up, get up, get up.
He said and slapped my ass, hard. I still didn't move. He leaned into the trunk, grabbed me by the shoulder, and rolled me over. I saw his face and was ready. Since he had to lean in and reach for me, he was at a close range. I hit him directly in the face and eyes with a full blast of wasp spray.
Gah!
He said and staggered back. I leapt out of the trunk as fast as I could, the metal latch of the trunk hitting the back of my scalp and then digging into my back and gashing me as I flew through the air. He was rubbing his eyes and coughing, spitting and hunched over. At his beltline was a large sheath with a knife handle sticking out of it. In my frantic rage, I sidestepped him as he gagged and sputtered, gripped the knife handle and yanked it backwards. The blade came free, and I hammered it down into the small of his back, again and again. I managed 3 deep stabs in a quick succession before he jerked up quickly and swung his arms backward, striking me in the face. I held steady, and he was stumbling and windmilling like a dazed and unskilled boxer. He swung at me again, and I had the knife blade up and raked it across his forearm. He screamed and gripped his new wound. I stepped back and out of reach, seeing that he was distracted for the briefest instant. I swung the blade at his face and other arm and then ran back away from him. He staggered around drunkenly and tried to rush me, but I was too far away and was able to dodge him easily. He whimpered and fell to his knees and crawled towards his vehicle and collapsed. I stood watching him, breathing heavily. I could feel my own blood running down my back and head from the gashes I had suffered jumping out of the trunk. Out of nowhere, from behind me, a voice spoke.
Excuse me, miss. Do you have a couple bucks I could borrow?
I almost jumped out of my skin and whirled around and held the knife out in a defensive posture.
My dog and I are awfully hungry. We've been on the road a long time.
It was the man and the dog I had seen at the gas station. He was tall with a dark complexion, and he looked clean. I looked down at the dog and saw he was still wearing that hoodie. His owner reached down and pulled the hood back, and what I saw, my mind couldn't comprehend. The dog looked like a pit bull mix of some sort, its fur a mixture of white and gray. But the remarkable thing about the dog was that it had two separate heads. They panted and smiled the way dogs do, but doubly. I stammered. There was so much going on at once. I had just been kidnapped, had just stabbed a guy multiple times, and now a man with this two-headed pit bull were asking me for money. And I didn't even have money on me. It was back in my car.
I'll make it worth your while,
the man said. I went over to my bleeding captor, held my knife at him. He was on his stomach, inching towards his car. I stepped on the back of his thigh and he groaned. In the back pocket of his blue jeans was the bulge of a wallet. I bent over and plucked it out. "Here you go," I said and handed it to the man with his dog. "Take as much as you want." He smiled at me.
"I'll take care of this from here. Your car's at the end of this gravel road. Did you need anything else?"
"I think I can manage," I said. As I went down the road, I could hear the other man's screams echo behind me. I checked the papers for Steamboat Springs all summer, and there was never any mention of a dead body or vehicle found. My guess is that there was nothing left of the body and the vehicle simply disappeared. I still see him sometimes as I'm out there, standing on the highway exit ramps or outside gas stations. He always gives me a little wave. I feel like he shows up like this to remind me that he's still there, looking out for me. I don't know if they're right about traveling alone. I certainly had managed to get out of the situation on my own, but it could have ended up so much differently. I still have the occasional nightmare and flashback and sick feeling when I think back on how I could have ended up raped and murdered. The near-death episode hasn't knocked me down, however. I still have that zest for travel. Do I still travel alone? Yes, but only because I've had a little extra protection ever since that summer night in northern Colorado. You have to take special precautions if you're out there by yourself, no matter who you are. Check in with people frequently and let them know your location. Practice situational awareness and have some means of self-defense. And if you see a panhandler on the side of the road with his dog, toss him a couple bucks. You really can't be too careful.